Yuna stood at the altar and watched the human walk toward her. The great hall of Allura Station was cold. The walls were made of dark metal. Blue lights glowed along the ceiling like distant stars. 300 guests sat in silence. They were all watching. They were all waiting. She had imagined this moment many times. She had pictured a tall human with broad shoulders. She had imagined someone who would smile at her, someone who would try to impress her with words and gifts. The humans were known for their confidence. They talked too much. They laughed too loud. They always wanted everyone to notice them. But the man walking toward her was none of these things. He was not tall. He was average height, with a lean build, like a runner or a dancer. His black hair was cut short and neat. His face was calm, showing no emotion at all. He wore a simple, dark suit, not the decorated military uniform she had expected. He carried no weapons that she could see. His name was Tejo. That was all she knew about him. The marriage had been arranged by the Valari High Council. Yuna's people needed an alliance with the Human Systems Coalition. The humans controlled important trade routes through dangerous space. The Valari needed those routes to survive. So they offered a marriage between their noble houses and the humans. Yuna was the daughter of Councilman Biamsu. She was 26 years old. She had lavender skin and silver eyes, like all Valari. She was considered beautiful among her people. She had studied diplomacy and art. She spoke 4 languages, had prepared her whole life to serve her family and her people. She had not prepared for silence. Tejo reached the altar and stood beside her. He did not look at her. He looked straight ahead at the officiator. The ceremony began. Words were spoken. Vows were exchanged. Tejo spoke only when required, and his voice was soft and flat. He said, "I do," like he was reading from a manual. When it was over, he took her hand. His grip was gentle but firm. His palm was rough with calluses. She wondered what kind of work had made his hands that way. They walked down the aisle together. The guests clapped politely. Yuna smiled and nodded at familiar faces. Tejo did nothing, just walked. The reception was worse. Yuna moved through the crowd, greeting friends and family members. She introduced her new husband to everyone. Each time, she waited for him to speak. Each time, he simply nodded. Sometimes, he said hello. Most times, he said nothing at all. Her mother pulled her aside near the end of the night. "What is wrong with him?" her mother asked. Her silver eyes were sharp with worry. "Is he sick? Is he stupid?" "I do not know," Yuna admitted. "He does not speak. All humans speak. They never stop speaking. I have met human traders who talked for 3 hours about the weather. Something is wrong with this one." Yuna looked across the room. Tejo stood alone by the window, staring out at the stars. He held a glass of water that he had not touched. Perhaps he was nervous, Yuna said, but she did not believe it. There was no nervousness in his posture. He stood perfectly still, like a statue, like someone waiting. The first weeks of marriage were strange and lonely. Yuna and Tejo shared quarters on the station. The rooms were large and comfortable, with soft furniture and warm lighting. The space felt empty somehow. Tejo was always polite. He said good morning when he woke up, said good night before bed. He thanked her when she made tea. But he never started a conversation. He never asked about her day. He never shared anything about himself. He spent most of his time sitting by the viewport watching the ships come and go. Sometimes he read old books on a datapad. Sometimes he exercised in the small gym attached to their quarters. He moved well, she noticed. His body was controlled and precise. Yuna tried to learn about him through observation. She watched the food he chose. Simple things: rice, vegetables, plain meat, no spices, no sauces. She watched how he organized his belongings. Everything in its place. Every item folded or arranged with care. She noticed scars on his arms when he wore short sleeves. Thin white lines crossing his skin like old writing. She wanted to ask about them. She never did. Her friends sent messages asking about her new husband. What is he like? Is he handsome? Is he good to you? She did not know how to answer. He was not unkind. He was not cruel. He was simply not there. He existed in the same space as her, but he lived somewhere else, somewhere far away, behind those quiet eyes. One night, Yuna came back to their quarters late. She had attended a dinner with her father and several council members. The conversation had been about trade agreements and shipping routes. Boring but necessary. She expected to find Taeho asleep, or perhaps sitting by the window as usual. Instead, she found him at the small table in the living area. A cloth was spread across the surface. In his hands was something she had never seen before. It was a blade, not a plasma cutter or a vibroknife, the kind of weapons common in the modern galaxy. This was something old, very old. It was made of metal, simple steel, with a long curved edge. The handle was wrapped in worn leather. The blade itself was bright and clean, catching the light like water. Taeho was polishing it with a small cloth. His movements were slow and careful, almost loving. Yuna stood in the doorway watching. She did not want to interrupt. There was something private about this moment, something sacred, but he noticed her anyway. He looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, she thought she saw something in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or embarrassment. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual calm. "You were back early," he said. "The dinner ended early." She walked closer, looking at the blade. "What is that?" He held it up so she could see better. The metal was beautiful, old, but well maintained. She could tell it had been sharpened many times over many years. "It belonged to my grandfather," he said, "and his father before him. It has been in my family for a long time. Why do you keep it?" "It is old technology. A plasma weapon would be more effective." Taeho looked at the blade. His thumb traced the edge gently, not quite touching the sharp metal. "Some things are not about effectiveness," he said. "Some things are about meaning." Yuna sat down across from him. This was more words than he had spoken in their entire marriage combined. She did not want the moment to end. "What does it mean to you?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time. She watched his face, looking for any hint of what he was thinking. But his expression remained still. Only his eyes moved, studying the blade like it held secrets written in the steel. "A promise," he finally said. "It means a promise." He did not explain more. He finished polishing the blade and wrapped it in the cloth. Then he stood and walked to the bedroom without another word. Yuna sat alone at the table for a long time after that. She thought about his words. A promise. What kind of promise required a blade that old? What kind of man kept such a thing? She was beginning to realize that her silent husband was not broken. He was not empty. He was simply hiding something. Something deep and old and sharp, like the blade itself. The weeks passed slowly on Allura Station. Yuna continued her duties as a council member's daughter. She attended meetings. She greeted visiting diplomats. She smiled and spoke carefully, always representing her family with grace. Taeho remained silent. But Yuna began to notice things about him that she had missed before. Small things, important things. He woke every morning before the station's artificial sunrise. She would hear him moving quietly in the dark, exercising in the next room. Push-ups, sit-ups, stretches. It's the same routine every day, the same number of repetitions. When she woke, he would already be dressed and sitting by the viewport with a cup of tea. He watched everything. She realized this one day when they walked through the market district together. She was shopping for new fabric for a dress. He walked beside her, saying nothing as usual, but his eyes never stopped moving. They tracked every person who passed. They noted every doorway and corridor. They watched the security guards and the merchants and the beggars in the corners. He was not just looking, he was measuring, calculating. "You are very observant," she said to him that evening. He looked at her, but did not respond. "In the market today, you were watching everyone." "Old habit," he said. "From where? What did you do before this?" Turned back to the viewport. The stars drifted past slowly. A cargo ship was approaching the station, its lights blinking in the darkness. "I was a soldier," he said. Long ago, she waited for more. Did not come. The first sign of trouble arrived 2 weeks later. Yuna was having lunch with her father in his private office. Councilman BM-Su was a tall Valari, with gray skin that showed his age. He had served on the council for 30 years. He was wise, but sometimes stubborn. There are reports of Makari ships in the outer sector, he told her between bites of salad. Yuna felt a chill. The Makari were a violent species from the far edges of known space. They had green scales and yellow eyes and bodies built for fighting. They made their living through piracy and smuggling. Most civilized species avoided them. How many ships? She asked. 3 or 4. Nothing to worry about. They're probably just passing through. Should we increase security? Her father laughed softly. Makari are scavengers, not warriors. They attack weak targets. Laura Station has good defenses. They would not dare. Yuna wanted to believe him, but when she returned to her quarters that evening, she found Taeho studying something on his datapad. She looked over his shoulder and saw a map of the station. He was marking locations with small red dots. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Learning the layout. Why?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The Makari ships in the outer sector. Have you heard about them?" "My father mentioned them. He says they are not a threat." Taeho did not respond. He continued marking the map. She saw that the red dots were at exits and access points. Emergency corridors. Maintenance tunnels. "You do not agree with my father?" she said. "I have no opinion on your father's judgment. Then why are you marking escape routes?" He finally looked at her. His dark eyes were calm but serious. "I am marking exits," he said. "It is good to know where the exits are." That night, he did something strange. After dinner, he asked her to sit with him at the table. He placed a small knife between them. It was nothing special, just a common kitchen blade with a wooden handle. "Take this," he said. "Why?" "Keep it with you." "Hidden in your clothes?" Yuna almost laughed. "I am a councilman's daughter. I do not carry weapons. You are also my wife." His voice was soft but firm. "Please, take the knife." Something in his tone made her stop. She looked at his face and saw no fear there. Only certainty. Only patience. She took the knife. "Where should I hide it?" He showed her. The inner fold of her formal robe where the fabric doubled over. The knife fit perfectly, invisible from the outside. She practiced reaching for it until the movement felt natural. "Why are you teaching me this?" she asked. "Because the world is not always safe," he said. "And I cannot always be beside you." She did not know what to say. No one had ever cared about her safety this way before. Her family loved her, but they assumed the station would always be secure. They assumed guards and walls would always be enough. Taeho assumed nothing. The following week, Yuna noticed more changes on the station. There were new faces in the market district. Makari faces. They wore merchant clothes and carried trade goods. But something about them was wrong. They stood too straight. They watched too carefully. Their hands stayed close to their belts, where weapons might be hidden. She mentioned this to her father. He dismissed her concerns. "We have trade agreements with several Makari merchants. It is normal for them to visit. These do not look like merchants. We're being paranoid. Your human husband has filled your head with nonsense." But Yuna could not shake the feeling. She watched the Makari when she passed them in the corridors. They watched her back. Their yellow eyes followed her with cold interest. She told Taeho what she had observed. He nodded slowly. "You have good instincts," he said. "Trust them." "What do you think is happening?" He was quiet for a long moment. She had learned to wait for his words. They came slowly, but they always mattered. "The Makari are predators," he said. "They study their prey before they strike. They learn the patterns. They find the weaknesses. Then they attack when the prey feels safe." "You think they are studying us?" "Yes. What should we do?" He walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. His reflection was faint in the glass, a ghost floating in the darkness. "We should be ready," he said. 3 days later, a Valari merchant was found dead in the lower decks. His body was in a maintenance corridor that most people never used. Security said it was an accident. They said he had fallen and hit his head. Yuna heard the news from her mother. She immediately went to find Taeho. He was in their quarters, cleaning his blade. The old steel gleamed under the lights. "You heard," she said. He nodded. "Security says it was an accident. Security is wrong." She sat down across from him. Her heart was beating fast. She felt afraid in a way she had never felt before. The station had always been her home. It had always been safe. "How do you know?" she asked. He set the blade down and looked at her. His eyes were dark and deep, like water at night. "'Cause I saw the body," he said. The wounds were not from a fall. They were from a blade. The Makari used curved knives with a particular edge. "I recognized the marks." "You went to see the body?" "How?" "I have my ways." She stared at him. This man, her silent husband, had secrets she could not begin to understand. He moved through the station like a shadow. He noticed things no one else noticed. He prepared for danger that no one else believed existed. "What happens now?" she asked. Tae-Ho picked up the blade again. He held it carefully, testing the weight in his hand. "Now we wait," he said. "And when they come, we will be ready." That night, Yuna lay awake in bed for hours. She listened to the hum of the station around her. She felt the small knife hidden under her pillow. And she wondered what kind of man she had truly married. She was beginning to understand. He was not broken. He was not empty. He was a weapon himself, hidden in plain sight. And soon, very soon, she would see him unsheathed. The attack came during the Festival of Stars. It was the biggest celebration of the year on Allura Station. The corridors were filled with lights and music. Families gathered in the main plaza to watch dancers and performers. Children ran through the crowds with glowing toys. Everyone was happy. Everyone was distracted. Yuna stood with her family near the central stage. Her father was speaking with other council members. Her mother was greeting old friends. The air smelled of sweet cakes and spiced wine. It should have been a perfect evening. Tae-Ho stood beside her, silent as always. But she noticed that he was not watching the performers. He was watching the edges of the crowd. His body was tense, like a spring ready to release. "What is wrong?" she whispered. "Too many of them," he said quietly. "The Makari. They are positioned around the plaza. At least 40 that I can see." Una looked where he was looking. She saw them now. Green-scaled figures scattered through the crowd. They were not watching the show. They were watching the exits. They were watching the council members. "We should tell security," she said. "No time." The lights went out. For a moment, there was only darkness. Then the screaming began. Yuna heard plasma fire somewhere to her left. She heard bodies falling. She heard the terrible sound of metal meeting flesh. Red emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in a bloody glow. The Makari had drawn their weapons. They were everywhere. They grabbed people from the crowd. They shot anyone who tried to run. The festival had become a massacre. Someone pushed Yuna hard. She fell to the ground and looked up to see a Makari soldier standing over her. His yellow eyes gleamed in the red light. His blade was raised. Then Tae-Ho was there. She did not see him move. One moment he was beside her. The next moment he was between her and the Makari. His old steel blade caught the enemy's weapon and turned it aside. His free hand struck the Makari's throat. The soldier made a choking sound and fell. "Run," Tae-Ho said. His voice was calm and flat. "Take the corridor behind the stage. Turn left, then right. There is a maintenance door. Hide inside. I cannot leave you." "You can. You will." He looked at her, and his dark eyes were fierce. "Go now." Yuna ran. The station had become a nightmare. Makari soldiers were everywhere, dragging people from their hiding places. Yuna saw her people being beaten and bound. She saw bodies lying still on the floor. She ran past it all, her heart pounding in her chest. She found the corridor Tae-Ho had described. Left turn, right turn. The maintenance door was exactly where he said it would be. She pulled it open and slipped inside. The small room was dark and cramped. It smelled of oil and metal. She pressed herself against the wall and tried to control her. Breathing, she could hear sounds through the door. Footsteps, shouts in the Makari language. Plasma fire in the distance. She reached under her robe and felt the knife Tae-Ho had given her. The metal was cold against her fingers. Time passed. She did not know how long. Minutes felt like hours. Then the door handle moved. Yuna held her breath. She gripped the knife tight. The door opened slowly, and a figure stepped inside. Yellow eyes. Green scales. A Makari soldier. He saw her and smiled. His teeth were sharp and crooked. He said something in his language that sounded like a laugh. Yuna did not think. She acted. She drove the knife forward, aiming for his stomach. But the Makari was faster. He caught her wrist and squeezed until she cried out. The knife fell from her fingers. He pushed her against the wall, his face close to hers. His breath was hot and foul. "Pretty Valari," he said in broken common tongue. "The boss will like you." Two more Makari appeared in the doorway. They were bigger than the first. They carried heavy plasma rifles. One of them laughed at the sight of her. Yuna closed her eyes. She thought of her family. She thought of the station. She thought of Taiho, alone somewhere in the chaos. She heard a soft sound, like wind passing through leaves, then a wet thud, then another. She opened her eyes. The first Makari was falling. His hand was still on her wrist, but his body was collapsing. She saw the wound across his throat, dark blood spilling out. Behind him stood Tae-Ho. He was different now. The calm man she knew was gone. In his place was something else. Something older. Something dangerous. His blade moved in his hand like it was alive. The second Makari raised his rifle. Taeho was already moving. He stepped inside the soldier's reach, too close for the weapon to aim. His blade punched through the gap between armor plates. The Makari gasped and dropped. The third tried to run. He made it 2 steps down the corridor. Taeho threw a small knife from his belt. It struck the Makari in the back of the neck. He fell without a sound. Silence. Yuna stood against the wall, shaking. She stared at her husband. His face was still calm, but there was something burning behind his eyes. He was breathing slowly, controlled, not even tired. 3 Makari soldiers, dead in seconds. Killed by one man with an old steel blade? "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. She could not find words. He walked to her and took her hand. His fingers were warm, steady. "Stay behind me," he said. "We need to find your family." They moved through the station together. Taeho led the way, his blade in his hand. Yuna followed close, her eyes wide, her heart racing. She saw him fight 3 more times that night. Each time was the same. The Makari were bigger, stronger, better armed. It did not matter. Taeho moved through them like water through stone. He found the gaps in their armor. He struck before they could react. He killed without hesitation and without rage. He was not angry. He was not cruel. He was simply precise, efficient, perfect. They found Yuna's mother hiding in a storage room with a group of other civilians. She was terrified, but unhurt. They left her with some other survivors and continued searching. They found Yuna's father in the council chambers. He was alive, guarded by 2 security officers who had managed to escape the initial attack. His face was pale with shock. He asked when he saw them. "The Makari are everywhere. How did you get through?" He looked at Taeho. At the blood on his blade. At the bodies they had left behind. "What are you?" he whispered. Tae-Ho did not answer. He walked to the window and looked out at the chaos below. The Makari were still fighting in the lower levels. Security forces were beginning to push back, but it would not be enough. "They are taking hostages to the central hub," Taeho said. "That is their command post. They will try to negotiate from there." "How do you know this?" the councilman asked. "Because it is what I would do." He turned to face them. His eyes moved from face to face. Finally, they settled on Yuna. "Stay here," he said. "Keep the door locked. Do not open it for anyone." "Where are you going?" He smiled. It was the first time she had ever seen him smile. It was small and sad and beautiful. "To finish this," he said. Then he was gone, moving into the darkness like a ghost. Like a blade sliding into shadow, Yuna watched him go. She pressed her hand against the glass of the window. She was not afraid anymore. Not for herself. She was afraid for the Makari. They had no idea what was coming for them. The station was dark and filled with smoke. Red emergency lights glowed in the corridors. Alarms rang in the distance, lonely and desperate. Teho moved through the shadows. His blade was in his hand. His breathing was slow and steady. He had studied the station's layout for weeks. Every corridor, every junction, every access tunnel. He knew where the Makari would set up checkpoints. He knew where they would leave gaps in their patrols. He found the first group of survivors in a storage bay on Deck 7. 30 people huddled in the darkness. Valari families. A few humans. Some of them were injured. All of them were afraid. A young human woman stood at the front. She had short black hair and fierce eyes. She held a metal pipe in her hands like a weapon. When she saw Teho, she raised the pipe. "Who are you?" she demanded. "My name is Teho. I am here to help." "Help how?" "There are hundreds of Makari out there. Then we will need to be careful." He looked at the group. Most of them were civilians with no combat training. But he saw a few faces that looked different, stronger, more alert. "Are any of you soldiers?" he asked. A big human man stepped forward. He had a bald head and thick arms covered in tattoos. "I am Dong Ha. I work in the cargo bays. I served 2 years in the Colonial Guard." Another human raised her hand. It was the young woman with the pipe. "I am Subin. I am an engineer. I never served in the military, but I know how to fight." "Good." Teho pointed to a Valari male near the back. "You, what is your name?" "J1," the Valari said nervously. "I am a medical technician. Stay with the injured. Keep them quiet. We will return for you." He looked at Donghan Subin. "You too. Come with me." They moved through the station together. Teho went first, checking each corner before they advanced. The Makari had set up patrols, but they were careless. They thought the battle was already won. They did not expect resistance. They found weapons on the bodies of fallen guards. Dongha took a plasma rifle. Subin took a pistol. Teho kept his blade. "Why do you use that old thing?" Subin asked. "A plasma weapon would be better?" "Plasma weapons make noise," Teho said. "Noise brings enemies. A blade is silent." He proved his point at the next intersection. 2 Makari soldiers stood guard in front of a sealed door. They had their backs turned, talking quietly in their language. Teho moved. He crossed the distance in 3 heartbeats. His blade opened the first soldier's throat before the Makari knew he was there. The second turned, reaching for his weapon. Teho's blade found the gap under his arm. Both soldiers fell without a sound. Subin stared at him. Her face was pale. "How did you do that?" she whispered. Teho cleaned his blade on the fallen soldier's uniform. "Practice," he said. "They freed more survivors." They disabled power junctions to blind the enemy sensors. They sealed bulkheads to trap Makari squads in corridors where they could not escape. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Other humans on the station began to fight back. A cargo loader named Jiate used his heavy lifting suit to crush Makari soldiers. A cook named Mira threw boiling oil at a patrol that came too close to the kitchens. A group of teenagers used their knowledge of the maintenance tunnels to lead families to safety. The Makari had not expected this. They had expected easy prey. They had expected surrender. They had not expected humans. During a brief rest in a secured corridor, Subin sat beside Teho. She watched him check his blade for damage. There was none. The old steel was as sharp as ever. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He nodded. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" He was quiet for a long time. Dongha was sleeping against the wall nearby. The corridor was silent, except for the distant hum of the station's engines. "There was a colony," Teho finally said. "A small world called Bologna 7. It was a farming settlement. Peaceful, my family lived there. My parents, my sister." He paused. His eyes grew distant. "The Makari came 5 years ago. They wanted slaves and supplies. The colony had no defenses. Just a few security guards with basic weapons. What happened? I was part of a military unit stationed nearby. We received the distress call. We flew as fast as we could. His voice was flat, but Subin could hear the pain underneath. We were almost too late. When we arrived, the Makari had already killed most of the colonists. They were loading the survivors onto their ships. Your family? My parents were dead, but my sister was still alive. She was in one of the transport ships. He touched the handle of his blade. I went in alone. The rest of my unit provided cover. I fought through 20 Makari to reach her. You saved her. Yes, he looked at his blade. This was my grandfather's sword. He taught me to use it when I was young. He said a blade is not just a weapon. It is a promise. A promise to protect those who cannot protect themselves. He fell silent again. Subin waited. That night on Bologna 7, I made a promise to myself. He continued. I would never be too late again. I would never let the people I care about die because I was not ready. He looked at her. His dark eyes were calm but deep, like a lake at night. That is why I fight. That is why I watched the Makari when they came to this station. That is why I memorized every exit and corridor, stood up and slid his blade back into its sheath. Because promises are not just words. They are actions. Subin nodded slowly. She understood now. This quiet man was not cold or empty. He was the opposite. He cared so much that he had built himself into a weapon. We should move, Tejo said. The Makari will be regrouping. We need to hit them before they can organize. They gathered their small team. Dungha woke up and checked his rifle. Other survivors had joined them now. 12 fighters in total. Not many against a Makari army, but they had Tejo. They pushed deeper into the station. They hit supply points and communication centers. They freed prisoners from holding areas. Each victory was small, but each victory mattered. The Makari began to realize something was wrong. Their patrols were disappearing. Their communications were being disrupted. Something was hunting them in the darkness. One of the Makari commanders sent a message across the station's broadcast system. His voice was angry and confused. Humans, he snarled. We came here for slaves and treasure. We did not come for war. Surrender now, and we will be merciful. Continue fighting, and we will kill every living being on this station. Tejo heard the message. He did not respond with words. He responded with action. An hour later, that commander was dead. His body was found by his own soldiers. Single blade wound through his heart. The other Makari began to fear the dark corridors. They began to look over their shoulders. They began to understand that they were not the hunters. Anymore, they were the prey. And the long night was far from over. The Makari had gathered in the central hub. It was the largest open space on Allura Station, with high ceilings and wide walkways. Perfect for a final stand. They had taken hostages. 40 Valari council members and their families knelt on the floor with their hands bound. Among them was Councilman Byamsu Yuna's father. His face was bruised and tired, but his eyes still burned with defiance. The Makari commander stood at the center of the hub. He was tall for his species, with dark green scales and a scar running across his face. His name was something unpronounceable. His soldiers simply called him the Claw. Send a message to all survivors, the Claw ordered. Tell them we have their leaders. If the human warrior does not surrender himself, we will start killing hostages. 1 every 10 minutes. His soldiers obeyed. The message went out across the station. Yuna heard it from the council chambers where she had been hiding. Her heart went cold when she heard her father's name among the hostages. I have to go, she said. I have to help. The security officers tried to stop her. She pushed past them and ran into the corridor. She did not get far. A hand caught her arm and pulled her into a side room. She spun, ready to fight. It was Tejo. He was wounded. She could see cuts on his arms and a burn mark across his shoulder, but he was standing. He was alive. Cannot go to the hub, he said. They will use you against me. My father is there.
I know.
I am going to save him. She looked at him. He was calm as always, but there was something else in his eyes now. Determination. Purpose. How? She asked. There are 40 Makari soldiers in there. Even you cannot fight all of them alone. I will not be alone. He nodded toward the corridor behind him. Subin and Dongha were there, along with a dozen other fighters. We have been gathering our forces. We will hit them from multiple points. Create confusion. While they are distracted, I will go for the leader. That is suicide, he smiled. It was a small smile, sad and gentle. Maybe he said, but I made a promise. I will never be too late again. He reached out and touched her face. His hand was rough but warm. Stay here, he said. Please. Let me do this. She grabbed his hand before he could pull away. Come back to me, she said. Promise me. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I promise. He turned and walked toward the central hub. His team followed behind him. Yuna watched them go, her heart heavy with fear. The attack began with an explosion. Subin had rigged the ventilation. System was small charges. They blew out on the east side of the hub, filling the air with smoke and dust. The Makari soldiers turned toward the blast. Raising their weapons, Dongha and his team opened fire from the north entrance. Plasma bolts cut through the smoke, dropping soldiers before they could react. The Makari returned fire, but they were confused. They did not know how many enemies they faced. The Claw roared orders at his soldiers. Hold your positions. Protect the hostages. But his soldiers were panicking. They had been hunted through the dark corridors for hours. They had lost friends and commanders. They were tired and afraid, and then they saw him. Taeho walked through the main entrance. He walked slowly, calmly, like he was taking a stroll through the market. His blade was in his hand. The old steel caught the emergency lights and glowed red. The Makari fired at him. He was already moving. He flowed between the plasma bolts like water between rocks. He moved so fast that the eye could barely follow. The first soldier fell before he knew Taeho was there. The second managed to raise his weapon, but the blade took his arm before he could fire. The third tried to run. He made it 3 steps. The Makari broke formation. They could not understand what they were seeing. One human with an ancient blade, cutting through their ranks like a scythe through grain. Taeho did not stop. He did not slow down. He moved through the chaos with perfect control. Every step had purpose. Every strike was precise. He was not fighting like a soldier. He was fighting like a storm. Councilman Su watched from where he knelt on the floor. His eyes were wide with disbelief. What is he? He whispered. No one answered. There were no words for what Taeho was. The Claw watched his soldiers fall. Fury twisted his scarred face. He grabbed a hostage and pressed a blade to her throat. Stop, he bellowed. Stop or I kill her. Taeho stopped. He stood in the center of the hub, surrounded by fallen enemies. His blade dripped red. The Claw laughed. Stupid human. You think you can fight all of us? You think one warrior can change anything? Taeho said nothing. He simply looked at the Claw. His dark eyes were steady, calm. Drop your weapon, the Claw ordered. Kneel or this female dies. Taeho let his blade fall. It clattered on the floor. He knelt slowly, his eyes never leaving the Claw's face. The Makari commander smiled. He stepped toward Taeho, still holding the hostage in front of him. You humans are so predictable, the Claw said. Always sacrificing yourselves for others. Always so emotional. He stopped in front of Taeho. He kicked the blade away. Any last words, human? Taeho looked up at him, and then he smiled, as he said, You should have counted my blades. His hand moved. The small knife hidden in his sleeve flew out and buried itself in the Claw's eye. The Makari commander screamed. He dropped the hostage and stumbled backward. Taeho rolled forward, snatching his blade from the floor. He rose and struck in one smooth motion. The Claw fell. The remaining Makari soldiers stared at their dead leader. They looked at the human standing over his body. They looked at each other, then they ran. It was over. Una found Tejo sitting against a pillar in the hub. He was wounded in several places. Blood soaked his clothes, but he was alive. She ran to him and fell to her knees beside him. "You promised," she said. Tears were falling from her silver eyes. He looked at her and smiled. That same small, sad, beautiful smile. "I keep my promises," he said. She helped him stand. Her father came over, still shaking off his bonds. He looked at Tejo with new eyes. "I was wrong about you," BMSU said quietly. "I thought you were weak. I thought you were broken." Out. He bowed his head. "I was a fool." Tejo accepted the apology with a nod. He said nothing. He did not need to. Months passed. Life returned to Elora Station. The damage was repaired. The dead were mourned. The alliance with humanity grew stronger than ever. Una found Tejo by the viewport one evening, watching the stars as he always did. But now she sat beside him without hesitation. Now his hand found hers naturally. "You never told me you could do that," she said. "You never asked." She laughed softly. "What else have you not told me?" He was quiet for a moment. "Then, I make good tea." She leaned against his shoulder and closed her eyes. The stars drifted past in silence. The station hummed around them, alive and peaceful. For the first time, the quiet felt like home.